bolts out. I've loosened a lot of them because I just wanted to make sure that they come loose, and had to hand brake a couple to get them loose. But I'm going to go ahead and pull all these bolts out, and that way we can get this casing off. Takes a little force to lift it, get it to rise up. Now pull these pistons out. There we go. All the piston rings look like they got good spring to them, but we'll get the pistons cleaned off. These rings replaced. Here's a look at the cylinders. Might be a little hard to see. That is the top cylinder, cylinder 1. So it's in pretty decent shape. All the cylinders themselves seem to be in pretty decent shape, so they will only need a honing. I'll have to, you can see some light scratching right in there. Nothing that can't be taken care of with a nice honing. And we'll look back at cylinder 1. This is your most likely for overheating due to being at the top of the tower of pistons, and it is the furthest away from the water source. But these all are looking pretty good. Here's a look at the pistons. And they all got build-up, carbon build-up. I'll get that cleaned off. This is the only one that had completely loose rings. So none of these were floating. This one's got one piston ring that's kind of stuck. This one, this first piston ring, kind of stuck. All the others are floating, and then this one all free. This is actually cylinder number 4. Get some scratch marks here on the side of the piston, and you can see a little bit right there, but I didn't really notice anything in the cylinder. Take a better look with a stronger flashlight. These are the pistons. I'm going to get these cleaned up, ringed, and we'll get this sucker back in the power head. Now here on the surface for the block pieces, you want to do this by hand and be very gentle. try to get the surfaces cleaned up for the new adhesive, new gasket maker. Got that surface all done. I'll do the same to this, and then we'll get in deeper on cleaning all these off. Here it is, all sanded. I'm just gotta wipe that surface down and make sure you do not sand in these channels. These have to stay smooth and clean. So sorry about the skipping around. I have got the pistons dipped down in a mix of transmission fluid, a little bit of acetone, and Marvel Mystery Oil. And I've already gotten all the rings off. I'm just trying to get everything cleaned out really good. This is sat overnight in this mixture. I'm also going to end up using this container when I hone the cylinders. Put the block right over top of it, because there's going to be a lot that drains out through the spark plug holes as well. But you can see some of the scoring here on the sides of the piston, which isn't too bad. I'm going to take a Scotch-Brite pad, go over these, over the side skirts, and I'm working on getting a groove cleaning tool to go back through the grooves and make sure they're nice and smooth when I put the new rings on, so I won't have to deal with those binding and then causing issues like this again and loss of compression. Another tip when you're sanding your surfaces to clean off gaskets, like this side here with the exhaust, I used a 60 grit. I wasn't quite as worried. I'm going to go back over it with a 120 grit just to make sure I got it all smoothed out. This side, a lot of this is just from the water, all the gunk that was in the water, so it'll come off pretty easy. I'll end up pouring some stuff on it, take a brush to it, get a lot of it off, get her all cleaned up, and then same thing with this surface, 60 grit and around the spark plug holes, and then go back with a 120 grit just to smooth it over, make sure everything's good. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the plates. These I'll probably just need to do the 120 grit. They're mostly pretty clean already. We'll get those surfaces nice and cleaned. And where the fuel pumps attach, I'm going to go back over those with a 120. The scratches are only on the pistons after taking a good look at the cylinders, so I shouldn't have any issue there. Just got to smooth those out with a Scotch-Brite pad, and that'll help clean off the gunk off the piston faces, which isn't too bad either. And we'll get this all taken care of, and then after that we'll get this block honed. And I'll show the process of honing cylinders out, so we can get the cylinders all set for the new piston rings. here I'm going to hone the cylinder. I got the stones pretty much saturated. Had them sitting in the muck down here. I poured some fluid into the cylinders already. It's regular automatic transmission fluid. That you can use. Want to keep your drill slow, and a good way to do it, never let your pads go more than just barely above the side here. That way you never hit the pivot point, because it can force them out and you don't want to mess up that boat. So next what we're going to do, now that I've sprayed some degreaser all over it, degreased everything, rinsed it off, right after spraying it down with water or soapy water and brushing it and cleaning out passages, use rinse and then spray it down with WD-40 while it's still wet, and that will help push the water off, help it dry, and help protect it from surface rust building up. So I've been going through the manual, and I did want to point out a couple things I've noticed. The reed valves are very different on mine compared to what I've seen in the manual. They are very large compared to the small paddles that are on the pictures in the manual. So I've got that one right here and this one right here. It does have the large reed valves and then the closer panels, but I wanted to point out that's a little bit different. And I did notice my end caps have no shims. Now, since I did not have to remove any bearings or I didn't take off any of the pistons from the crank, I should not have to worry about any balancing issues. I should be able to put everything right back together. I am going to check tolerances though when I go to put everything back together, just to make sure everything's good, but it should be good.
pistons after final cleaning and deburring on the grooves. I used a ring groove cleaning tool. Found the size that I needed for my grooves, and I was going through them, and I'd test the new rings and they would still get stuck. So a trick I used was push down on the groove you're on. It'll help get across the bottom, smooth that edge, and then go to the top and smooth that edge, and it'll get a lot of the baked on oil and stuff clear of the grooves. And then you'll have to go back over it with a Scotch-Brite pad, kind of smooth it out as best you can. Then wash the whole thing again. All the grooves are done. And a lot of these rough spots are sanded down some. So they're a lot smoother. And did a roundabout brushing all across the pistons, all 4 of them. So ring installation. First, I'm gonna go ahead and spray a little WD-40 on the rings. Just enough to get it a light coat, kind of shift it around between the rings, coat them, and this will help get them into the slots. So there they are, all coated. I'm going to take a set of piston ring pliers. You want to open it up just enough to clear it, and be very careful that way you don't break the ring. Very free and clear movement there. Third one. You can get a set of these cheap as dirt on Amazon, on eBay, or you can get it from your local parts store, Harbor Freight, Lowe's, Home Depot, whatever, AutoZone. But just piston ring pliers, they make this job so easy. You can see how well those rings move around. Trying to squeeze them together a little bit here, and they're still springy and able to move around. So the grooves are really clean. Also, I want to go over real quick the testing on your piston rings. Make sure the grooves are good. Just run it along here, slide it around, roll it around, however you want to do, and you're able to find binding spots. And there's the pin, but that's the technique for checking to make sure your ring's gonna clear the groove. as you can see, it has a little cutout on the inside. That's to go around that pin. That is, you got one on the outside grooves down here, and then one in the middle down here. So that's why I'm trying to spin them to certain directions. It's because of where the pin is. Makes it easier to line up when I compress the rings. So for all of those that do not have a hoist like me, I had to borrow one just to get the power head out of the outboard. I rigged up with a rope just around the beam to hold the crankshaft while I'm putting this in. I got a slip knot here so I can make easy enough adjustments to height as I'm working. Right here, I just put a knot and it slides. So there's a quick knot here and it'll actually slide and adjust for balancing. So just a little tip and idea for anybody that is curious how to do that without a hoist. So I had a little mishap. Right as I was finishing getting the pistons put in, I was getting ready to start doing this one, and I guess it hit against the side or something and broke one of the rings. I had another one break before that. Waited a week, piston ring came in, and then this happened. So ended up having to wait another week. And finally got the new rings in. I've got a set of 3, so I got a couple backups. So I've already got the first one in. What I've been using, and I may get some slack over it, but I've been using a little bit of assembly lube just because it's tacky and will hold in place. Just to get just put a little bit around the rings just to help them stay in place a little bit better for the guide pins. And then after I get it in, pour just a little bit of Marble Mystery Oil down into the groove right here, get it around the rings a little bit, and I'll use that to get the cylinders pre-seated. So like I said, just a little bit. And kind of let it soak around, and it'll get in on the rings where they go in too far. So there's a couple different methods you can use if you do not have the mercury clamps, which are real big, have teeth that'll fit down into the grooves and hold the piston rings in. You can either use a pair of screwdrivers and push the pins in as it drops, or you can do it with your fingers as well. Personally, I kind of like the finger method just because I can get a little more detail. I know exactly where I'm trying to press on, and sometimes I'll end up using the screwdriver too. But we're going to get the rest of these pistons put in real quick. I'll show you the process. I've already got the assembly lube on all the piston rings, so that way they have some kind of lubrication, and it's kind of tacky as well. It helps hold them in place. Another thing to check for as well, as it goes through each cylinder, exhaust and intake valve, you can push on your piston rings. If they push back, then they're good. If they don't, and they just stay in place, then you've probably got a broken piston ring. All the rings appear to be free, so we're going to move on to the next step. Like I said before, I don't really need it, but I'm going to show you the crankshaft play how-to on calculating that. So first what we're going to do is you're going to, without the O-rings on here, you're going to go ahead and put your caps back on. Not the top of the crankcase, but just the cap on here. And make sure it's down, and then you're going to screw the cap back into place. So what you're doing is finding the difference between the gap at the top, between the cap and the counterweight, and the gap on the bottom between the cap and the counterweight. And you don't want a tolerance difference bigger than 0.004 to 0.008 between the two. You can use shims to adjust that gap difference. Next part, you want to make sure the surfaces are nicely wiped down, because this is a metal-to-metal contact on these. There is no head gasket or crankcase gasket. Go around, make sure it's wiped off properly. Okay, so we've got our instant gasket. And try to get this thin but full. so that's going to do it for now. We got the top torque down. I'm going to clean off some of this excess gasket. But our next video will be the assembly of everything else going back on the outboard engine itself. So stay tuned. If you like this video, make sure to smash that like button. If you are not a subscriber right now, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can get updates when I post new videos. But until next time.